All right. We've got Dr. Fuhrman on the Urban Pharmacy podcast today. And I was just telling Dr. Fuhrman that I feel a little bit starstruck because he is an incredibly well-known plant-based advocate. And I'm so excited to meet you, Dr. Fuhrman. Thank you so much for being on today.
My pleasure. Excited about talking to you today.
All right. So I do this with most of my guests. I did this with Talia when your daughter was on just a few months ago. I want to know from you, Dr. Fuhrman, before we start talking about all things nutrition, what is your current favorite food?
My current favorite food, I'd have to say either a cherimoya.
Is that also known as a sugar apple?
No, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't think so. Yeah, they have like a green, like alligator skin. They're pure white inside with little black pits. I grow it here, but it's really like it melts in your mouth like jelly. And of course, I like jelly figs. I have a lot of fig trees. I love them too. But I love different types of like maybe a lemon meringue mango is really good. So it's just I probably like fruit is my
tropical fruit.
Some tropical fruits is my most favorite things.
Yes, so good. I've tried a cherimoya. I've tried atamoya as well.
Well, I have an atamoya tree too.
Oh my gosh. What about a soursop? Have you ever tried a soursop?
I have. It's a little, yeah.
So good.
And a sweet stuff, yeah. But cherimoya is still a little bit on top.
It's up there. Okay. Okay, good. Okay. So now we know. All right, it's cherimoya is king. Okay. So Dr. Fuhrman, can you tell me about how in the world you got started in what you do? I know you are a past figure skater. Like, can you kind of take us back to where your whole health journey really began?
Yeah. Well, really, my health journey came because my father was overweight and ill as a child. And I spent a lot of time as a child. My father was going from doctor to chiropractors in the back, couldn't sit up. He was in the back seat of the station wagon lying on a mattress with back pain and different problems. And then he read Dr. Shelton's books. I think he read Jack Duntrop's book in the 1950s called You Don't Have to Be Sick. And that got him into Dr. Shelton's books, Herbert Shelton, and then who wrote his books in the 1950s late 1940s, early 1950s. He wrote about eight to 10 books. My father started reading and changing the diet of our family when we were kids. We started to eat healthier at the age of 10 or 11, 12, 13. So at first, when my father was changing our diets as a child and making it healthier, I first thought he was crazy, but as I got older and I started reading and understanding more about the body, then of course, and I was, as you know, I was a competitive figure skater. I was third in the world in pairs figure skating with my sister, Gail, my younger sister, in the 1970s. So we ate healthfully, very healthfully, to try to have better stamina and not get sick, to compete at a high world level. And then I just, then I realized I became passionate about it because I saw from my exposure of how many people this could help and how it was able to reverse disease, not just in my own family, but I had a lot of exposure as a teenager to people who recovered and reversed disease through the American Natural Hygiene Society, called then, and then it became the National Health Association. So that was my initial introduction into healthy eating and this way of living. And then, of course, I decided to go to medical school. You could say, thought about going to medical school, but finally made the commitment to go back to Columbia to take the pre-medical courses because I had graduated from college without the prerequisites to go to medical school. So at that point, I was competing in skating and never thought about it. So then I went back to Columbia, took the prerequisites, and then went to University of Pennsylvania School of Medicine. In the early 1980s with the specific intent of being a physician specializing in nutritional medicine. So I didn't learn this as a physician. I wasn't a doctor who then tried to change the way they practiced. Right out of the box, I was going to medical school with the intent of being a doctor to specialize in nutrition because of how passionate and excited I was about the prospect of getting people totally well, getting them off their drugs, and having people not have to have medical tragedies happen to them.
Yes. Oh man, that's so good. So you have so many different ways that you reach and touch people in terms of how to transform their health. You have like a farm, right? You have a place that you bring people, in addition to, of course, like your practice and your books and all the things that you've done, but like and retreats, right? Like,
Yeah.
you've really healed people. Tell me a little bit more about that. Like,
Right. As a family doctor, I saw, all people of all ages, from babies to elderly, and I've had a lot of wonderful personal satisfaction helping people get well, from like teenagers with lupus who were told they need to go on dialysis, or people with psoriatic arthritis, or people whose colons were full of ulcerative colitis to the point where they had to have their colon cut out. And I said, don't have it cut out. I put a person living before my daughter was born, there was somebody in her bedroom in New Jersey, living in her bedroom with colitis, who told me he had his colon cut out, and I had him live with us for 3 months, to save his colon. So I always had a lot of personal satisfaction having people, like I had a girl, her as a teenager, on a national renal transplant list, waiting for a new kidney because her kidney was blown out from lupus. And she made a total recovery. Her creatinine went from 4.2 to 0.8. She restored her kidney function back to normal with my nutritional reversal protocols. And I'm just giving a couple of examples. And people with multiple sclerosis or rheumatoid arthritis or psoriatic arthritis. And of course, the run-of-the-mill bread and butter, losing weight, getting rid of diabetes, getting rid of heart disease, getting off the blood pressure medications, the statin drugs. The primary thing here is that drugs are not health foods. They're toxic and they cause cancer. And the more drugs you need to take, and the more years you take them, the higher your risk of cancer. They shorten lifespan, and people have they only know the mere tip of the iceberg about the complicated nature of how drugs induce disease. Like, for example, the link between calcium channel blockers and breast cancer, or the link between just blood pressure medication and causing diastolic blood pressure to be too low, causing atrial fibrillation, now requiring more drugs for atrial fibrillation. One drug leads to another drug. The whole medical profession is based on, how should I say, giving people, like enabling people to continue their addictions with dangerous food because they make the number look better on the blood pressure or the number look better on the blood test. So they think it's okay to still eat a disease-causing diet. So inevitably, the medications just result in people's demise and having a poor quality of life. If we never had medication, then doctors would have to tell people to get healthy and change their diets and lose weight and get rid of their diabetes. And so I give people that hope that through nutritional excellence and specific disease reversal nutritional protocols, they can make a complete recovery and not be destined to be sick the rest of their life and on drugs forever. And I've tremendously enjoyed that career. So I've had my shows on PBS. I've seen patients in my office for decades. And now I also have, and I do a lot of lectures and podcasts, and I also work with university students and graduate students. I lecture at Northern Arizona University. I'm an adjunct professor there. So in other words, I still teach, and I've always taught, had a lot of doctors, a lot of personal satisfaction from doctors learning from me. I've taught a lot of doctors and been instrumental in their careers in moving towards a nutritional oriented career. And then of course I have my retreat in San Diego, because my experience over the last 3 decades are that some people have food addiction to such an extent that they need to be immersed in a safe place without temptation and relearn their outlook on life and relearn their visions, so they can now adhere to healthy eating and enjoy it and not be attracted to or get rid of their cravings and mental preoccupation with eating foods that are dangerous for them. And so in other words, just like a drug addiction center, you can't just tell a person to stop cocaine, especially if they're living around all their cocaine friends. Food addiction is even worse because everybody around you is a food addict, and they don't even consider themselves addicts, but they're all trying to sabotage your decisions to eat healthy. So my retreat has enabled people not just to come here for enjoyment and enjoy the saltwater pool and the hiking and the basketball and the paddleball and the pickleball and the disc golf course and not just on the beach and not just here to come and enjoy the chefs, but people really come here mostly because either they're overweight or they have some serious illness they want to recover from. And they spend time here, like 2 to 3 months here most often, because you need that time to not just get well, but to cement the program. So when you leave, you're not craving and not desiring those other foods. That's why they put people with cocaine addiction and other drug addictions in rehab centers for 3 months, because it reduces recidivism, because you need abstinence away from your addictive stimulating substances for the brain to reset itself, to not crave those foods anymore. So that's where I get a lot of have the ability to take people who are food addicts and uncontrollable eating and get that back in control and get them to like eating this way and stay with this long term. So I built this retreat here in San Diego so they're able to help those people too.
Got it. Yeah. So, okay. So that's incredible. And I want to talk a little bit more about food addiction, because I think it's funny that you said, it's not funny at all, but it's funny that you brought up that everybody is addicted to food and they don't even realize it. Right. And it's just, for instance, like my husband messaged me last night. He was working at at the farmers markets, and he, wasn't trying to be rude, but he asked me, do you think that all of these people, want to be overweight? Like, do you think that people just want to stay that way? And I was like, of course not. They're addicted. They're addicted to the food and they don't realize it. So can you explain like what's happening a little bit with these processed foods? Because I mean, he and I both have experienced that. We are now we've broken free, thank God, from the sugar, the oil, the salt, that's just so highly addictive. What's happening? What can people do to try to break free from this, like fast food genocide, which is your book? Like, what can we do as humans to try to break free from this addiction that we don't even realize is happening?
Right. They can't break free from it, because first they have to recognize it as an addiction. And if they're not even recognizing that, because it's societal. Everybody's eating junk food, processed foods, and all these dangerous foods. So they think it's just normal. So they don't even, reminds me of when my daughter, Kara, who's 27, when she was 4 years old, she was at a boot camp for kids, and I was working out with weights next door. And she came out and said to me, "What's the matter? These parents don't love their children?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And she said, "They're feeding them, marshmallows and all kinds of cheese doodles and junk food that's going to hurt their bodies." And I said, "They don't know what's bad for you." And she said, "How could they be so stupid?" She doesn't, they don't know what you eat makes who you are and makes your body grow sick or well. And I said, "No, they don't even know that." And she said, "How could they be so stupid?" And I said, "Well, it's because everybody's doing it. And it's like, if everybody's smoking, the brain, it's called cognitive dissonance. You block out from conscious thought anything that would cause you stress or anxiety. Even though they know they're overweight, they know they're not eating healthfully, they block out thinking about it because everybody else is doing it. And then they, of course, the addictive nature of, like you said, concentrated calories. When you eat sugars and oils and fried foods and these concentrated calories, they come into the bloodstream so rapidly that the rapid influx of calories into the blood that you can't duplicate eating natural foods affect dopamine centers in the brain, the same brain areas where narcotics are stimulating those dopamine centers. And it makes them dopamine insensitive over time. So they require larger amounts of food and larger amounts of brain stimulation to feel the same. So they need it eventually just to feel okay. So they feel fatigued, wiped out, shaky, even a little withdrawal symptoms. They don't keep putting high calorie food in their body. And they just think they're just eating because they're hungry, because if they don't eat food, they feel fatigued, they feel wiped out, they got time to eat, they feel like eating, they got to eat. And they almost can't control that, but they don't understand it's food addiction. And they don't understand that the symptoms they're feeling that drives them to eat aren't hunger. They're withdrawal symptoms from their calorically excessive diet. So they're feeling withdrawal symptoms that they interpret as hunger, and it makes them crave and desire more calories than the human body needs. And they don't even know that it's abnormal. It's like the withdrawal from cigarettes or from caffeine or nicotine or opiates. they consider that hunger, and even the medical textbooks consider, headaches and stomach cramping and fatigue are symptoms of hunger, which they're not. They're symptoms of withdrawal from an unhealthy diet. Real hunger is felt in your neck and upper part of your throat, right in this area of the body. And I know this because I've been doing this for treating people for more than 3 decades, on watching them get healthy and how the changing perception of hunger. Then you don't feel hungry only when you need calories, and then true hunger becomes a precise computer directing you the right amount of calories. Toxic hunger, withdrawal hunger, will drive you to be overweight, because it has to. And then the brain, the more you're an addict, the more you lose function of the cerebral brain. The primitive brain drives your actions, because meeting those addictive needs becomes a priority in your life. So you become a priority to smoke, a priority to drink, a priority to eat burgers and pizza and French fries and soda. It becomes a priority to get your ice cream. So that takes over your decision making. So it's no longer a priority to be the best human you could be, your care for your people you love, or your community or other human beings, or taking care of the planet. Nothing else matters. Nothing else drives your passion. You lose your passion and enthusiasm for being the full person how you could have contributed to humanity, because now yourself and meeting your own self needs becomes an overriding personal, personal drive that you can't control. And you said, how could you stimulated my answer by saying, how do people get rid of their addiction? And I'm saying that they can't unless they abstain from addictive substances long enough. You can't get rid of alcohol unless you get off the alcohol for a time period, and then the drive to consume it lessens, and you're off the cigarettes long enough, when you're off the cocaine long enough, when you're off the sweets and the salt and the fried foods long enough, the drive to overconsume calories and overconsume those foods lessens with time. But you have to first get the person to recognize they need to abstain and start to eating, not just dabbling in healthy eating, but go full blast into healthy eating. Because most people, baby stepping their way in, continues to imbibe in their addictive substances, putting their body under more stress. And they most cases fail. Most people on diets fail because they don't make a radical enough change to stop the addictive substances completely, to let the body reset itself and stop craving those foods. So anybody can look up the studies and how many people are successful at dropping 100 pounds and keeping it off for 5 years or more. Right. It's almost like, not even 1%. But the point is that we have such a high rate of people dropping their needed weight, whether it be 50 pounds or 150 pounds, and keeping it off forever for the rest of their life. Because they intellectually and emotionally are retrained in a way to think, and they recognize their behavior as addictions. And as long as they have that period they need a good 3-month period of not having any sweets and salt and really being, so like I can go out if I wanted to, I don't want to, but if I ate something that was like, if I had something addicting, like a donut or something, it wouldn't make me into a food addict to want to eat 6 donuts. I wouldn't have to, I would just say, I'm never gonna have a donut again in the rest of my life. That's just so bad for you. I just did it as an experiment. But for another person who has an addictive relationship with food, going out and having that donut could drive them into a whole binge that's gonna last for 2 months now, or just derail them and have them gain their weight back. And so individually, we have to counsel people with a different outlook on life and a different way of getting pleasure. And they get pleasure from food, and eventually their taste buds reset themselves, and they learn the recipes, and they get just as much pleasure from eating as they did eating junk food, but without being without ruining their health, and without being self-destructive. But it takes time to achieve that, and it's not easy for people to do this. They have to learn a lot, and that's why I tell people, like when I wrote my first book, Eat to Live, back in 2004. It wasn't my first book. It was my first big, major book. But when I wrote that book, I wrote in the first chapter of the book, I wrote, don't change your diet until you read the whole book. Don't just read the chapter and go to the recipes, because you're not going to succeed. Get educated first. Study this information, highlight it, and learn about food addiction and what it means to be healthy. And then you could do this, because you really need to know a lot of information to do this right, to increase your chances of succeeding with it.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the nutritarian diet. This is what you've coined. This is the completely plant-based way of eating. I know that in the plant-based community, in the plant-based world, there's just a little bit of like, I want you to talk about seeds. I want you to talk about nuts and seeds mainly, but whole food plant-based, right, is what nutritarian is. And you're going to tell us more about that. But why specifically did you include nuts and seeds in it versus not?
Not to, I'm not saying this personally because you're just wanting to get information, but it's such a ridiculous question, because why are you including vegetables in your diet?
Yeah.
Why do you include fruit in your, why should we eliminate you eating all vegetables? I mean, what is it? What are you talking about? Why do we have to justify eating vegetables? So the point that I'm making is that because a few radical individuals in the plant-based world advocated people not eat nuts and seeds, fear of eating fat, without any justification or science behind it, then they developed a following. But there's no reason to, there's never been a study that showed with looking at people long-term utilizing nuts and seeds or not, there's any benefits to not eating nuts and seeds. But there have been scores of studies, probably over 30 different studies, evaluating the lifespan enhancing and lifespan extending effects of nuts and seeds, including dramatically reducing risk of cardiovascular death. So the idea of removing nuts and seeds with no justification behind it is just absolute insanity. First of all, let's look at what the studies show. And if a person wants to do that, pull up some long-term studies following people for decades and seeing the outcomes. Because there's never been more an issue that has more corroborating evidence. In other words, if you're asking me, is it beneficial to use fish oil or this or that or whatever, something, the person could show studies showing it's good, studies showing it's bad. Some studies show this, some studies show that. We got to look at all the studies and see where the good studies are, where the bad studies are, where the evidence overall points to, but not with nuts and seeds, because every study shows the same thing. They all show incredible, tremendous benefits. And we're talking about people getting oil out of their diet.
Right.
And in place of the oil, using a whole food. So it's a sunflower seed instead of the sunflower oil. It's the sesame seed, but it's all its sesamins and lignans and calcium. Instead of the sesame seed oil, it's the soybean, not the soybean oil. It's the almond, not the almond oil. It's the walnut, not the walnut oil. When you eat a whole nut or seed, the calories come into the bloodstream very slowly, and the body can preferentially burn it for energy. When you take the oil extracted from a food, because there's no fiber and sterols and stanols that slow the absorption of fat into the bloodstream, the fat calories come in so rapidly, almost like sugar.
Right.
And those calories could be an appetite stimulant and drive food addiction. And cooking and frying oil causes rancid compounds that cause cancer. So any person afraid of consuming fat, if they're going to show you those studies, any study that corroborates that, it's going to only be a study on the use of oil, never on the use of a raw nut or seed. We look at the studies where people eat raw nuts and seeds, and there's, but the physician's health study, the Iowa Woman's Health Study, the nurse's health study, the Seventh-day Adventist health study too, whatever it is, they all show about a 39% decreased risk of cardiovascular death and about a 30% reduction in cancer death or all-cause mortality from people utilizing nuts and seeds. The Seventh-day Adventist health study too divided nut and seed intake into 5 different quintiles, 5 different sections. In the first section, people eating less than half an ounce a day had an increased risk of death, of heart attack death, 40% higher than people in the highest quintile eating more than an ounce and a half a day, approximately. So we're talking about the nuts and seeds facilitate the absorption of phytochemicals in plants. When you eat the plant foods without any fat in the meal, you're not absorbing maybe 20 to 50 times less of the beneficial phytochemicals, but also there's independent factors in the nuts and seeds themselves that make them protective and beneficial foods. So the question really isn't, we could go on to one study after another, the reduction of sudden cardiac death, the link of walnuts with reduced risk of cancer, all the great studies and how wonderful the fact that flax seeds and chia seeds reduce risk of breast cancer and turn into the digestive tract into entero and anti-entero lignans and estrogen, anti-estrogenic lignans that lower breast stimulation of breast and prostate from estrogen, and studies showing that the risk of breast cancer in people who have breast cancer, reduction of breast cancer death by like 71% from people adding lignans to their diet. But the point is I guess the point I'm making is where people got this crazy idea that cutting fat out of the diet and eating no nuts and seeds was beneficial is just like one person's idea, and he tried it and he saw people got well from heart disease because they ate just plants, and that made nuts and seeds the bad guy.
Right,
You can't, that's a limited number of people who did well without nuts and seeds. They weren't followed till death. Right. When we have a large number of people, we always give studies more credence, because obviously when a large number of people do the diet with no nuts and seeds, you're going to see a lot of excess deaths due to cardiovascular death, even on a vegan plant-based diet. Because that's the Seventh-day Adventist studies looked at all different cohorts of old, young men, women, different, ethnic and racial groups, as well as people on vegan, flexitarian, pescatarian, more, different types of diets. And the lack of nuts and seeds was always a significant risk factor. There's no nutritional scientist in the world that agrees with the idea that we should be cutting all the nuts and seeds out of the diet. It's just a couple of a very small radical grouping of vegans that are advocating that, because they follow these few gurus that have been lecturing in the community and produce books.
Yeah, that's why I asked you.
It's been unfortunate that I have to be a voice, a negative
I wanted
voice.
I wanted you to be a voice for the nuts and the seeds, Joel. Thank you.
It's uncomfortable sometimes. I have to criticize other people because they're advocating advice that's just harmful for people. And they're well-respected individuals that have their followings, but they're still, it's a black and white issue. It's not even a gray issue. Yeah.
Okay, so speaking of nuts and seeds, let's elaborate on G-BOMBs. Can you tell us about what G-BOMBs are, this acronym that you created, so that people can kind of have a guide of how to create meals that are nice and well-rounded?
Sure. It's funny because I was sitting on a couch with Mary Lou Henner. You know who Mary Lou Henner is?
Sounds really familiar.
Oh, she's a famous actress, and she was in Taxi, but she has this incredible brain where she can memorize anything in her whole life. It's like a special type of brain where very unusual, and that few people in the world can do it. Like she can tell her your birthday and she'll say whether it was raining, what the weather was like, what was happening in the news on that day. She'll know, But anyway, she was sitting there filming this promotion for some event. And she said to me, why don't you come up with some acronym to name the health? What is the 5 healthiest foods, 5 or 6 healthiest foods you consider, and you should have some acronym of like, just tell people here so they remember those 5 healthiest foods. Wow. And I was thinking, well, there are like 5 foods that produce, most studies show they're protective against cancer. And I started naming those foods. And she said, why don't you call them like GOMS or something? So she didn't come up with G-BOMBs, but she came up with the idea of me having an acronym for it. You follow me?
Cool. Yeah.
So
that's awesome.
So I came up eventually with G-BOMBs, which stand for greens, beans, onions, mushrooms, berries, and seeds. So people keep in the forefront of their thoughts what foods I want them to try to include in their diet every day, because they have the most powerful anti-cancer benefits. And, each one of the foods is absolutely remarkable in the studies on it. If you look at, mushrooms, for example, the studies on mushrooms are incredible. Even showing women who have like just 1 mushroom a day decrease risk of breast cancer by 64%. There's no drug that can do what a mushroom can do. If there was a drug that could do it, people would be paying $30,000 a month for it. And by the way, drugs cost. There are oncology drugs that cost $30,000 a month. I'm not just bringing that number out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. People are paying. And I was lecturing to these bunch of young oncologists, and they were saying, this drug at $30,000 a month only extends lifespan on the average 3 months. This is what these people are paying for. They're paying for $300,000 to extend lifespan 3 months when they could eat mushrooms.
Oh my God.
For a couple of, and I'm showing them how mushrooms have more powerful effects, even when people have cancer. But the synergistic combination of green cruciferous vegetables like bok choy and arugula, mm-hmm. with mushrooms and onions and scallion, and with the flax seeds and chia seeds, with the wild blueberries, we can design a synergistic effect on the immune system so people don't have to die of COVID and don't have to die of cancer. And preventatively, it's even more effective than waiting till you're sick without cancer, or waiting till so it's the craziest thing right now is how nobody's talking about nutritional excellence to stop people from dying of COVID.
Yeah.
it's just, it's all about the vaccine. But, we have all these obese people, and we know the studies show that the more sick you are, the poorer your health, the more overweight you are, the more medical drugs you're on, the more risk of death. And still nobody's telling people that they should eat healthy. It's still a complete silent conspiracy. And yet that demonstrates the depth of the way that this addictive mentality has permeated our society, that people can't even talk about this,
Yeah.
and so we have, but in any case, you're crazy if you eat like other Americans eat. And if you do that, it kind of makes you crazy too, because obviously there's a link between processed foods and fast food and commercial baked goods and depression.
Mm-hmm.
And there's only, in today's society, 1 in 5 Americans are mentally ill. 1 in 5.
Wow.
100 years ago, it was 1 in 500 were mentally ill. 1 in 500, now it's 1 in 5.
Wow.
But in any case, I mean, the food is driving this mental illness, and the food is also driving these people who can't think logically, who are led into conspiracy theories, who are led into the nonsense of like this, of climate change not existing, or whatever their belief systems are. They've laid themselves into a position where they don't have all the keys to the bank anymore. And because we know that the worse they eat, the more they can't think logically, they can't think scientifically. And we talk about losing neuroplasticity due to lack of nutrition of the brain, which means they live for instant gratification, whether it's food or whatever, grabbing on whatever they can hold on to. They're not long-term thinkers, protecting their lives of their children, grandchildren, future generations. People. So in other words, they've lost their ability to plan intelligently and put together the chess moves that's going to help them in the future. They just do the wrong things for their future just to immediately feel good right now at the moment. And that has to do with it. That's part of the addictive problem, part of the nature of food addiction. It takes people's long-term thinking away.
Yeah. So, okay, you were talking about future generations, and this is something that my friend, who is very much a fan of yours, wants to know. So I have to ask this for her because she's having a hard time with this. And I haven't experienced this because I've been raising my 4-year-old nutritarian, fully whole food, plant-based. This is definitely switching gears, sorry. But any general advice on the best way to talk to kiddos about food? I talked with Talia about you and like what you used to do with like Halloween candy, and we were joking about it because I heard you talking about like how you did Halloween way back in the day and stuff like that. But anyways, how do we talk to our future generations about why eating wholly unprocessed foods? How do we approach this? Is it about the planet? Is it about their health? Like, is it about the animals? Like, what do you think, Joel, is the best way to talk to these kids about the food that their friends are eating at school, and like why they might have a different lunch?
Yeah. Well, I'm agreeing with the question in the sense that there has to be that talk, and that talk, the ongoing learning talk, has to occur on a regular basis with the whole family intact, and the decisions the family make have to be made as a family unit. You don't want to impose healthy eating on your child and the parent is eating unhealthy in front of the child or eating unhealthy behind the child's back. It's the rules for the child, or they're given the value, their input and their mental capacity is much greater than people think. So you can try. I have a little dog next to me whose mental capacity at 12 weeks of age is just incredible. What he learns, a new puppy. But a 5-year-old child has a tremendous ability to understand reasoning and logic. What I'm saying right now is that because society is so self-destructive and hurtful with regard to people eating themselves to death, where everybody's dying of cancer or heart attacks or strokes or dementia, and there's so much autoimmune disease, there's so much food-related damage. I give lectures and I say to people, raise your hand if you've been struck by a bullet. How about stabbed by a knife? Anybody in your family? Anybody you know been stabbed by a knife or hit by a bullet? How about cancer? Anybody know somebody with cancer? Everybody's hand goes up. Everybody, heart attacks, everybody's hand. I said, you got to get out of that neighborhood. That's a dangerous neighborhood you're living in. You have to escape from that neighborhood fast. You don't want to put yourself at risk of death. Kids are not stupid. My children always said to me, they couldn't understand why parents fed their children so poorly. Why didn't they care for them? Didn't they understand? They don't understand that the parent eating unhealthfully doesn't really think in the forefront of their mind that what they're doing is so bad. So it's okay to give it to their child they love.
Yeah.
What I'm saying right now in response to your question is that there has to be a meeting on maybe once a week with the whole family present, where these things are where societal's dangerous habits are discussed, and how people eating fast food and processed food and burgers and eating, how it's destructive to the planet, how it's created a cancer epidemic, how millions of people are now dying of COVID because of their bad diet, and that any parent that really loves their children is responsible for educating them. And so my children eating healthfully in the home didn't see it as a punishment. They saw it as parents who loved and cared about them. Mm-hmm. And who educated them in a way of thinking that was a good way, that was important. And you could read segments of my books or Disease Proof Your Child and then talk about it. Mm-hmm. You could bring up a topic for discussion and say, if we know that, for example, smoking cigarettes is bad, how many cigarettes do we think it's okay that we all should be able to smoke? Well, probably, there's no desire to smoke cigarettes because we haven't been addicted to it yet. But so probably we're all going to agree that it's probably a bad idea for us to smoke cigarettes in this family. But, do you want to but people around us, they're all eating junk food, having birthday parties and bringing donuts and cupcakes to school. What would be an acceptable amount of that food if we know it's harmful? What do we think as a family we should do? Should we have none of it? Should we all agree to have none, or should we have it once a month, or should we allow us to have it once a week? Or whatever I'm saying is, I'm not saying what the family should decide, but I'm saying the family should decide as a unit. Mm-hmm. And try to be, and because when a mother or father brings their sickly child to me as a doctor who has lupus or asthma or some food issue or eczema, and I say, they got to change their diet completely. They're killing their child where they're feeding them. You know what I say to the child? I say, your parent I know you love your mother and father very much, but they're eating in such an unhealthy manner that the problem really isn't you because you're young. The problem is them. And if you don't help help them eat better, you're going to possibly have a parent who has some major medical condition that's going to rear its ugly head soon. And you're going to have a parent with a chronic medical illness or even premature death, because these parents don't know how to feed you. But most of the problem is they're older and they don't know how to feed themselves. So wow. I want to make sure I'm going to teach you how to eat so you can help your parent and make sure your parent comes in healthfully next time and so when I see you, I hope you report back to me how your parent was eating.
Yeah. Wow. And
if your parent decided to get rid of all the junk in their diet or not, because they need to lose weight and get healthfully. So I focus with the child, not on their diet, but on their ability to stop the parent from doing bad things for themselves. Mm-hmm. So the child has to become knowledgeable about what to eat to help the parent stay alive. And because this doesn't work if you force something on a child, it has to work on the child wanting to eat healthy and wanting to be a good role model for the parent, wanting the parent to eat healthy. So we're all learning about this together. There's nothing to force on kids. Yeah. I remember when my son Sean was also 3 or 4 years old. I don't think it was related to food. I think it was related to something to do with the oven or something. But anyway, my son, who's now almost 20. He went into a corner and started sitting down and like whimpering a little, and I said, Sean, what's the matter? I said, and he said, I don't remember the situation, but I said to him, what would you do if you were the parent and you loved your son as much as I love you? How would you act, or what would you say to your son in this situation? What would you want your son to do? And his eyes lit up and he stopped crying immediately. And he said, oh, I get it. It's because you love me. And I said, yeah, of course. And he knows that anything I've ever told him in life is almost because I love him so much. Mm-hmm. I'm only thinking of the best for him. It's never about me or. And so he's never, so he always knows I have his best interest at heart. Mm-hmm. And he always, so there's never any, contention over this. He might say to me, Dad, I know, don't tell me anymore. But that's
Right.
about it. He's not going to say, but the point is he makes his own decisions, but he knows what to do. And he knows that and I trust and I have faith that he's going to make good decisions. But if he doesn't once in a while, it's once in a while, and it's still his decision to make. So my children always could make their own decisions out of the house. It's just in the house we ate really healthy, and they knew how to take care of themselves out of the house, and they always made pretty good choices, not perfect, but they all, So I think that we have to learn this together as a family and feel that the parents are not teaching the children, but learning with the children. We're all learning this together. We're all reading an article we thought was interesting about, and we're all learning about this together, and that we could all help each other because we love each other.
Yeah. Good. Okay. As a family unit, I love that. Note taken. All right, Dr. Fuhrman, just a few more questions. I don't even know where to start because there's so many I want to ask you, but here's this one. If people could do one thing for themselves to benefit nutritionally, what would you suggest? One thing. I don't know. That's really hard.
No, that's not hard. I do that answer all the time.
Okay.
It's to eat a big salad every day as the main dish for one of your meals, usually either lunch or dinner, and not a 6-inch bowl, but a 9-inch bowl. And where you mix in all the raw vegetables, including raw cruciferous like bok choy, arugula, kale, lettuce, onion or scallion, and use a healthy dressing made of nuts and seeds, not, with nuts and seeds is the fat portion of the dressing. So one big, delicious, healthy salad with a healthy salad dressing at least once a day as the main dish. You could that the lunches that people eat here at the retreat that I recommend people eat are simple. A big salad, a bowl of vegetable bean soup, and a piece of fruit. A big salad, a vegetable bean soup, and a piece of fruit. If people just fixed their lunch, the whole world would change.
Yeah. And you follow the G-BOMBS acronym to make an amazing salad and you're all set.
Yeah, you don't have to include everything in there, but obviously the scallion or onion are in the salad raw are very powerfully protective against disease. And the little bit of cruciferous greens in there, like arugula, watercress, or bok choy, or kale, are very important. The whole thing, and you're putting in lettuces. People don't underestimate the effect of lettuce on the gastrointestinal microbiome and how great lettuce is for you. And then you have, obviously, the dressing is healthy, made with almonds and walnuts blended with tomato sauce and roasted garlic, or an orange with cashews and toasted sesame seeds and blood orange vinegar and some squeeze of lemon. And the dressings are delicious, but also healthy. And you put a healthy dressing on a healthy salad and you have a healthy lunch. And that goes a huge effect on changing people's lives and health outcomes.
Yeah. Speaking really quick of the onions and the garlic, have you ever tried onion sprouts?
Onion sprouts?
Oh, so good.
I don't think I have. Oh, you just take the onion seed.
Yes.
And you sprout them.
If you have a sprouting lid.
Yeah, I do. We sprout broccoli. We make a lot of broccoli sprouts here.
Yes. So I'm thinking, there hasn't been any studies on the allicin content and but there has been for sulforaphane, right? With the broccoli and the broccoli sprouts. So yes. I mean, you have to try onion sprouts. They are so good.
Great. I'm going to definitely try them. I'm sure they probably have powerful anti-cancer effects that we haven't realized yet,
Yeah.
People don't know how powerfully protective against cancer raw onion and raw scallion is. They have tremendously powerful protective against cancer. One study showed that people eating a half a cup, I think it was a third of a cup a day, had between a 55 and 88% reductions of almost all common cancers.
Wow. Yes, that's awesome.
So yeah, onions and scallions and onion seeds and onion sprouts must be fantastic.
Oh my gosh.
Try that. I'm glad you're
gonna love them.
See, I learned something new today.
You're gonna love them. I tell everybody about onion sprouts. They are just so good.
Great.
They're not that easy. They're not as easy as broccoli sprouts, but if you get good seeds, they'll germinate well, and they are so worth it. They are very much worth it. So, okay, last question before I ask the final thing. You talked about not underestimating things when it comes to our nutrition. Can you talk briefly about supplementation? I know that you have an entire line of supplements. What are we underestimating, do you think? Maybe one or two things that we're underestimating in terms of the standard American diet people are not getting, and that they should perhaps think about supplementing with?
Well, I think it's well known that B12 is not present in sufficient amounts in a vegan or plant-based diet. That's everybody. Most people know that. I think the missing links are in that, look, if you're on an American diet, not eating enough colorful plants, you're grossly and dangerously deficient in phytochemicals and antioxidants. You just mentioned sulforaphane and isothiocyanate in green vegetables, but they're so deficient in different compounds that it's one of the major factors leading to cancer. On a plant-based diet, the main issues are zinc, iodine, B12, and DHA and EPA. So in other words, zinc is more readily absorbed from animal products. The phytates in plant foods bind zinc, and zinc supplementation, the scientific literature, is linked to decreased risk of infection, pneumonia, and other, as people age. So a little extra zinc seems sensible on a vegan diet, especially in today's COVID times. So we're talking about B12, zinc. A lot of people are vitamin D, but that's not related to their dietary status. That's related to where they live, their skin color, and whether they're outdoors in the sun. But vitamin D is something we pay attention to make sure your levels are okay. Mm-hmm. And then you are at risk for dementia on a vegan diet, even if you're eating all the beneficial anti-dementia plants, if you're DHA deficient. And there's a blood test called an omega-3 index, and we know that there's a higher rate of brain shrinkage and dementia and cognitive impairment with people with lower levels. Mm-hmm. So I do make a vegan DHA and EPA. I started making that and got into this originally because so many of my patients and family members were taking DHA supplements and getting a burping and a bad taste in their mouth. Yeah. And so I designed my own that was put in glass and in refrigerated, shipped to us in refrigerated trucks and kept under refrigeration to keep it fresher. Mm-hmm. So I could testing the TBA scores, the rancidity scores, to having a fresh product. That's so I sell DHA and EPA because I know that through my career. Remember I told you earlier how you asked me how I got into this. Well, all my mentors and all those people who I knew from the American Natural Hygiene Society and the American Vegan Society, so many of them became demented and developed Parkinson's and neurological difficulties on vegan diets. And the bottom line was you have to make sure you have DHA adequacy. And so I'm very careful and don't take this lightly as to make sure that you're, if you're not eating foods with preformed DHA, to make sure you know your blood level and you're taking an adequate amount to make sure your levels are at least above 5, your omega-3 index. So yes, I make a supplement for that, but there are other brands and other people that make similar supplements. But mine, I think, obviously is I make it for my clients and people because I want them to have one that's totally fresh,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I had like so many questions about like your entrepreneurship and like all of the products that you have and everything, but we'll have to maybe do that.
It originally developed from, there's just this DHA issue. It developed because I started making a supplement because I wanted to make a DHA. And then I figured, well, my mind is people want a vitamin that has what a plant-based or a healthy person needs. So I put the iodine, the K2, the zinc, and the vitamin D and the B12 on the right amount for a vegan in the one supplement, so a person wouldn't have to take them separately. So those were the two things I started with to make it just easy for people to follow my recommendations. You know what I mean?
Love that. Oh, so good. Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you need to go to drfuhrman.com to get all of the goods, including your vanilla bean powder and all of the other really awesome foods that are on.
Vanilla bean powder is amazing.
It's
just a simple ice cream with just bananas, frozen banana, walnuts and macadamia nuts, and vanilla bean powder. You might put a drop of a plant milk in there to make it, stir it up, and it is so incredibly delicious. But vanilla bean powder is so expensive. Do you see what it costs?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's expensive, but it's hands down worth it. If you want your amazingly whole food plant-based desserts to taste absolutely incredible, you have to have it. It's a non-negotiable.
And it's also, people don't know that like vanilla bean powder is like an anti-cancer food. Where vanilla bean extract and flavorings are like not even healthy to eat. So it makes it something you make. The flavoring is super healthy. These spices and herbs and flavorings have anti-cancer potential in themselves. So that's a nutritarian, means you go all the way to being super healthy. And I make this stupid statement. It's because people want to believe a diet that's less healthy is just as healthy as a diet that's healthier. And I'm saying, as stupid as that sound, a diet that's healthier is much healthier than a diet that's less healthy. That sounds the most ridiculous statement. Doesn't sound so stupid, but that's what people are trying to convince you of. They're trying to convince you to eat less healthy and it's going to be just as good, right?
Oh man, so good. Okay, so all right, Dr. Fuhrman, here's my last question. I ask everybody this question, and I feel as though you live this way, but everybody has a different definition of it. So I want to know what your definition, what does it mean to you to live a holistic life?
Well, we want to fully enjoy our lives and get this, be as happy and healthy as we can and enjoy our lives right to the end. So obviously that means doing all the things that allow us to live healthfully and enjoy our lives. And that's getting enough sleep, getting regular exercise, having passions and things you're interested in, and obviously taking good care of your health and eating right and having people you love and being happy and being laughing and having positive emotion towards others. All those things come together. And if you don't have one, it's hard to do the other right. If you don't have good food, you can't be as loving and caring and passionate about what you want to get done. You're not excited about life, and you're under tremendous stress. When you're an addict, you're stressed out over all the things, So what I'm saying is that everything comes together. When you have one thing right, it makes the other thing easier to obtain. So we're trying to put all this together to be happy, to be joyous, to be loving, have passionate interests, and to be thinking about doing well for other people and the planet, at the same time being compassionate and caring for ourselves simultaneously.
So good. Thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. And I know people are going to love this. Okay, where can we find you? Where do we go to find you, Dr. Fuhrman? Your website, or do you want us to go to Instagram? Where do you want
the start is just to go to drfuhrman.com, drfuhrman.com.
And we'll have all of your links in the show notes too. So thank you for your time.
Take care. Good talking to you. Best of health to you, of course, and all your listeners.
Thank you.